Hello and welcome to the FASA Leadership Lounge, where we dive into the policies shaping the work of Florida's school leaders. I am Michelle White, Executive Director of the Florida Association of School Administrators.
And I'm Jessica Janasiewicz, lobbyist for FASA and several school districts across Florida. I'm excited to share what we're doing to prepare for the 2026 legislative session.
Can you even believe that we are already talking about the 2026 session?
No.
I know that it feels like the 2025 session just ended because it was only in June, but here we are, and those interim committee meetings, they're less than 2 months away. Meanwhile, of course, school is back in full swing, and our members have been working around the clock to make sure that the year starts off strong. So, buckle up. We got a lot to cover, especially today.
Now, the timing may seem a little strange that we're already talking about committee meetings starting again, especially since last year we didn't have committee meetings until January. But here's the thing, even year and odd year sessions follow completely different schedules. So in odd years, which are what we call non-election years, committee meetings run from December through February. It's a pretty compact schedule with meetings almost every single week in January and February. Session then starts in March and wraps up in May, unless it gets extended like it did this year. Even years are a different story. Committee meetings usually start in September of the year before and run through December. Those meetings are more spread out. Typically, we have about 2 per month. Then session starts in January and ends in March. Why would we have this different schedule? Well, even years are election years, and all members of the House and half of the members of the Senate are up for election. And since legislators aren't allowed to raise campaign funds during session, they want to finish session early so they can get back to fundraising and, of course, campaigning. And that's just one of the many ways that the 2026 election will impact the 2026 session.
Well, let's talk about some of those other political factors, of course, that could shape this 2026 session. Most of Florida's top leaders in government will look familiar. So, Governor Ron DeSantis is still at the helm, but in this year, he will hit his term limit and will not be eligible to run again. Just last week, he appointed Jay Collins as lieutenant governor. Collins is a decorated Army Green Beret, a former state senator, and already seen as a strong contender, or at the very least, a major player for the next race for governor. On the Republican side, the field is starting to take shape. Of course, we have Congressman Byron Donalds, who is backed by um, current President Donald Trump. He was the first to officially jump in to the race. Casey DeSantis, Florida's first lady, continues to kind of be floated around as another possible candidate. She's denied any plans to run, but both she and the governor have left the door open. And former US Representative and now TV host Matt Gaetz has hinted he might join the race as well, despite some ongoing controversies.
There's also some third party and independents that are in the mix. State Senator Jason Pizzo, who is formerly a Democrat, has launched an independent run after he, during this past legislative session, said that the Democratic Party was, and this is his quote, dead. He plans to self-fund the campaign and position himself as an ethical, rational choice outside of, your typical party system.
Absolutely. And we covered that in last season of the Leadership Lounge
That's
when he
right.
made that change. So, on the Democratic side, former US Rep David Jolly, who is now a Democrat, has announced his candidacy, emphasizing unity, optimism, and a solution first agenda on issues like housing, education, and gun safety.
Our legislative leaders will remain the same as they were last year, with the Florida House of Representatives being led by Speaker Danny Perez, who's a Republican from Miami. He began his role in late 2024 and will continue through this legislative session. On the Senate side, the top seat is still President Ben Albritton, and the majority leader is Jim Boyd. He will be the Senate president following Ben Albritton, and the Republicans hold strong majorities in both of those chambers.
Absolutely. So, with all of that in mind and session really just around the corner, it's time for FAFSA to start to get to work on developing our legislative platform. Of course, before we just dive into that process, I want to take a moment and look back at last year's platform so that our listeners and our members, of course, can refresh their memory on what we focused on and what we accomplished. So, in the 24-25 year, we focused our legislative platform on three big priorities: recruitment and retention, funding for student learning, and safe environments for all. First, on recruitment and retention, FAFSA called for dedicated funding of at least $9 million for administrator professional development, more flexibility in meeting certification hour requirements, and salary increases for school-based administrators. And we also wanted to increase, or we also wanted districts to have flexible funds for mentor and support of new educators in their first 3 years. The next piece, when it comes to funding for student learning, the platform called for increasing the base student allocation, addressing population growth, and giving districts more control over how they use their revenue. It also includes more transportation funding, investments in instructional materials and technology, and stronger support for early childhood education, and the ability for districts to publicly promote their programs. Finally, on that safe environments for all piece, FAFSA has continued to push for more funding for school safety officers, guardians, and security measures, both during the school day and at extracurricular activities. We want to make sure that there's better mental health resources, more school nurses, support for administrators, families if they're killed in the line of duty, and tougher consequences for threats to schools. Plus, we have continued to call for funding to meet new school security requirements within the state law.
We've shared before, we were successful in securing additional funding for school safety during this last legislative session. And we also have some exciting updates to share regarding professional development funding.
Absolutely. So over the summer, FAFSA received notice that we did secure some funding that will allow us to offer some high quality professional learning to school leaders from across Florida throughout this next school year. We are excited to share some of those opportunities as the year unfolds, and just know that we are desperately looking for ways to make sure that you have the right resources at the right time on the right topics for the role that you're currently in or that you're aspiring to. Other exciting areas are student members of the Florida Association of Student Councils, or FASC, which we are the state sponsor of, are also hard at work on some of their priorities. They have been reaching out to elected leaders to share their ideas, including for proposals on a new leadership credential.
With all of that in mind, let's jump into how FAFSA develops our legislative platform and how you can get involved.
Absolutely. So we kind of start right about now. You're going to start seeing some requests for input through a survey, and we start collecting all of those things from various members across the state that say, hey, this is a pressure point for me in my school and or in my district. We need to talk about this. Or maybe there's a trend that is happening and that has led into additional conversations. Many years ago, even pre-COVID, we started talking about a shortage of teachers and how can we focus on recruitment and retention of teachers. So a lot of that comes from those initial ideas and conversations and proposals from our membership base telling us what's actually happening in our schools and districts. And Jess, I know you connect also with some of our other educational lobbyists, right? And
Yes, absolutely.
and maybe
So
bring
we'll
in from other organizations.
absolutely, because we like to see certainly it's always great when we can collaborate. So we also look at what the School Board Association, FSBA, The Superintendent's Association, FADS, they develop their own legislative priorities. So we always take a look at that. So anytime we can support those organizations and we're aligned in our mission, we love to have those things included on our platform. And of course, generally speaking, we're all kind of thinking a lot of the same things when it comes to some of the major issues like school safety and things like that. So we'll look at that. And then also districts develop their own priorities. And so we'll get input there and see, if there's some kind of uh, connective thread that we're seeing that is popping up throughout, a number of districts in Florida. And that's something that we can bring as a proposal for the platform.
Yeah. And so then what we do is we take all of those pieces and put them together for our legislative committee, which if you are a FAFSA member and you would love to get more engaged, our new committee form and our call for volunteers is going out, has gone out. Check your Friday facts. Please volunteer to participate because this committee actually then takes all of that input and figures out where is the most need. So even though we will probably incorporate most of these topics that come into our overall platform, we do kind of bubble up a few priorities where our team between Jessica and I and Jeff, our policy and programs manager, is also having ongoing meetings with legislators or other lobbyists to talk about where FAFSA is on particular issues. And then when we have our advocacy conference, we're sending all of those members into the Capitol with the same message. So that committee will come together and help us even wordsmith some things and sometimes even figure out, is this a statute issue? Is this a rule issue? Is this something that's even an issue directly at a district level rather than at the state level? So trying to just reprioritize and organize, where are those pressure points happening and how do we solve to push an easy button, hopefully, for our school leaders. Once that is developed, our FAFSA board meets, reviews, potentially makes tweaks or changes, and then approves the platform for us to move forward. And that is really that guiding document.
And once our platform's finalized, we share it, of course, with our members. The FAFSA team, we start taking it directly to legislators as well as legislative staff. And this is a great opportunity for you to help promote our platform during the Advocate conference that we have in January this year. It'll be held January 26th through the 28th. So please mark your calendars and plan to be there. This is a great time to be able to be here in Tallahassee and share what is important to FAFSA. This is your chance to meet with your legislative delegation. You'll also be able to attend committee meetings. And since this year session will actually be happening in January, you'll be able to watch the House and Senate debate legislation and vote on bills during their floor sessions. So it's a front row seat to the legislative process and an opportunity to make your voice heard. FAFSA's platform and our voice is only as strong as our members. So in our membership. So get involved, please, and make your voice heard. We want as much input as possible on our platform. So please don't hesitate to share your ideas and feedback.
Absolutely. And this is the perfect launching off point, I think, for episode 2 of the Leadership Lounge in season 2. I hope that you also had an opportunity to listen back at episode 1, where we had an interview, so to speak, and conversation with Dr. Jen Halter, who is a principal in Clay County and also the chair of our legislative committee. It's great to see that member aspect of this work as well. And we're looking forward to what more will come within this next season. Look for more interviews for sure, and us to bring in some guest leaders along the way. That is our update for this week. We thank you so much for listening. It is a great episode, I think, of like basics of how this is all going to play out over this next year. So please share it with your colleagues. And of course, you can always visit our website at FAFSA.net be sure to click on the advocacy section to see bills as they start being filed, the current status of them, and some connection points between the legislature or the state board as they do rule developments, because those are coming along right now too, based off of last session. So stay tuned for those updates, especially as we move into this next week or so and look at some of those rule changes. So thank you all for listening and stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge podcast presented by the Florida Association of School Administrators. Today's podcast was hosted by Michele White and Jessica Janasides. The podcast is produced by Jeff Willoughby. Special thanks to musical director David Higgins. Make sure to subscribe to the Leadership Lounge podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts. New episodes are released each Monday. For show topic suggestions, questions, or comments, please email communications@vasa.net. We hope you enjoyed the show.